I can hear you.
All right, let's do our live stream check.
Okay. What about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're coming in perfectly now.
Okay, but I don't know if you saw my message. I can't join from my presentation laptop. I'll try again though. Give me a sec.
We have good audio on the stream. Audio test, NIA IMPACT Collaboratory. the day one roster document.
Yep.
Yep, just keep an eye on that and keep an eye on it.
So Derek, I think we're all set. Is that correct?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. General welcome to everyone. This is Vince Moore. Good morning to everyone. On behalf of my fellow MPI, Susan Mitchell, I'd like to welcome you to our second annual Impact Collaboratory Steering Committee and Business Planning meeting. We are looking forward to our virtual gathering so we can share all that we've accomplished during this past very challenging year. Please use this meeting portal to view the meeting materials, follow along with presentations, and connect to the dashboard links for the special sessions on day 2 tomorrow. I'd like to begin by thanking our project officer, Dr. Partha Bhattacharya, for his commitment, engagement, and active partnership with Susan and with me as we've moved this enterprise through the complicated process of soliciting, reviewing, funding, and supporting pilots, CDAs, and other initiatives. We are particularly grateful for his advocacy for impact and for his encouraging the creation of new and different initiatives, which we'll be telling you about today. I'd like to also thank our 2 NIA project scientists, Dr. Lisa Anken and Marcel Salive, who advise us, review letters of intent and grants, and are committed to advancing the field. Of course, this work takes more than a village, and I would be remiss not to thank our committed core leaders and the many members of the cores and teams that make our accomplishments possible. In spite of the challenges of that this year has thrown us, the Impact Collaboratory family that has been forged on Zoom and other media this year is poised to do even more in the coming year. Now I'll turn to Susan and to finish our thank yous and to continue to MC this whole entire morning session. Susan?
Susan, please unmute yourself.
Okay, I'll start again. There's always one. So thanks, Vince. It's been a pleasure to welcome you all, and I want to echo all the thank yous Vince articulated. It's really my greatest pleasure. The Collaboratory has really been getting to know all of you, working with you, and learning from you. And I really have the honor this morning of thanking our exceptional administrative core team members at Brown and Hebrew Senior Life, who work seamlessly together to make all the complex parts of impact run and interact and be productive. And I would say, in large part, they are the foundation of the many accomplishments that you'll hear about today. So words do little to capture our gratitude, but nonetheless, first, thank you to our 2 executive directors, Jill Harrison and Ellen McCarthy. They're Vince's and my right and left arms, probably our legs too, and thank you both. On the HSL side, Elaine Bergman, Aaron Lewers, Lori Herndon, Beth Campbell, who are largely responsible for communications, training activities, and project navigation. At Brown, Faye Dvorak, Cindy Williams, Laura Bridge, Julie Lima, Tatiana Tubin, and Carolyn Malone, and Chantel Lewis, who largely manage our grant submissions, budgets, logistics, and regulatory processes. I also would like to give a shout out to all the core administrators and navigators who keep all the work on track, and in no particular order: Rachel Hayes, Soka Kuth, Kate Peath, Catherine Wessel, Chris Harkins, Amy Shelton, Kim Hom, and Jason Mann. And really, I do apologize if I missed anyone. Gratitude to Sonia Sutton and her team at DCRI Communications, who create and help manage our websites and communications and create some of the nice graphics you'll see today, and also to Rosalie and Associates for helping us organize this meeting. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Richard Hodis, Director of the National Institute on Aging. Dr. Hodis.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Vince, for the opportunity to be here, and thank all of you who've made this happen. Just like to take a few minutes to reflect on what you've already heard referred to, the extraordinary year past since the first and now to this second collaboratory meeting. The next slide, please. So we began with the notion that this meeting we're all sitting here through would reflect the rapid ramp up of research infrastructure since last year's meeting. Those important functions, including training, pilot, demonstration projects, and more. The next slide. However, there were a couple of complications that I think stress test the system and which the system reflected its great capacity to meet. The first was the exercise through ARC and the National Academies, which reviewed the level of data and evidence and suggested gaps to be filled in the area of research on caregiving around dementia. These reports then were reflected and were responded to by the IMPACT Collaboratory in a way that perhaps hadn't been foreseen at the very beginning, but this wasn't the only input exceptional for the year. Next slide, please. So having modified pilots, demonstration projects in response to the ARC review, next slide, please. We, of course, now we're confronted with living through as well COVID-19. So modifications in reflection of the assessment of science and its needs, and then the very great challenge to all of our communities by COVID-19. And one to which exceptionally the IMPACT Collaboratory in its very early stages was able to respond to successfully in a way that I will say is noted across all of NIH and research communities. Next slide, please. So this reflected the use of supplements to the RADx UP infrastructure, using IMPACT and the resources already in place, making the collaboratory really one of the earliest and most effective responders to the time urgent circumstances that were created by this pandemic. There were multiple COVID-19 related supplements, data sharing and data cooperation were shown to be great virtues and strengths of the collaboratory, and partnerships with the CDC, CVS for adverse event monitoring were some of the high points. Next slide, please. That then just reflects, I think, the exceptional way in which two unanticipated inputs to what the collaboratory can and is able to do were reflected in great success and response. A tribute to all of you, and I'm sure just the early stages of what is going to be ongoing contribution to the field. It's a great honor and pleasure for NIA, myself included, to be collaborating with all of you, and look forward to the excitement of these mornings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hodes, and thank you so much for your support. Well, I now have a great pleasure, and we're very, very fortunate to hear a few words this morning from a member of IMPACT's stakeholder engagement team. Dr. Brenda Nicholson is a retired oncologist living with dementia. She began her career as the director of the Clinical Breast Cancer Center in the Division of Medical Oncology at Vanderbilt University. And then between 2003 and 2014, Dr. Nicholson worked as a medical oncologist in a large private practice. In November 2014, at the age of 49, she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. And since her diagnosis, Dr. Nicholson has been contributing to national leadership regarding advocacy for people living with dementia and their partners, and she's been partnering with researchers. As a retired physician, she's well familiar with research and research methods, as well as the importance of evidence-based clinical care. And as a person living with dementia, she provides essential perspective for researchers working in this field. So we are very, very grateful to Brenda for so generously sharing her experiences and perspectives with the IMPACT community. And with that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Brenda Nicholson.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. To start, let me share briefly a little background about me. I worked as a medical oncologist, initially serving as the director of the clinical breast cancer program at Vanderbilt, but spending most of my career in private practice in Knoxville, Tennessee. I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 6 years ago at the age of 49. Since that time, I've also been diagnosed with corticobasilar syndrome, pseudobulbar affect, craniofacial dystonia, and laryngeal spasms. I learned in medical school, you never want to be a complicated patient. Good advice, but hard to follow. My involvement with the IMPACT Collaboratory has been to serve on the stakeholders engagement team and to help with the lived experience panel. Today, I'll share some of my thoughts and experiences living through the pandemic. I remember when things first started. I did what everyone else did and stocked up on food. The speed at which this virus spread around the world and the initial mortality rates we were experiencing was frightening and surreal, more like a fictional movie than reality. But reality hit hard with the scenes out of New York, the nursing homes on the West Coast, and the cruise ship stories. It was a terribly upsetting time for me, and I felt afraid and overwhelmed. It brought back how I was feeling when I was initially diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. I recalled what a helpful resource the Alzheimer's Association hotline was back then. So I made a call to the hotline, reaching out for help once again. The person I spoke with was incredibly kind and supportive. She helped me know that I was not alone in what I was feeling, and she helped me put my irrational fears to rest and gain perspective. In addition to my family, I draw strength to cope with life's adversities through church and friends. But the pandemic cut me off from both attending Mass and seeing friends. So when I learned that Alzheimer's Tennessee was doing their memory cafe by Zoom, it was a lifeline. Connecting with this support group was a turning point in my ability to cope with all that happened in 2020. The pandemic brought about many personal life changes as well. Our way of living well with Alzheimer's was to make short-term plans with friends and long-term plans to travel so that we always had something to look forward to. However, over the course of 2020, our apartment began to feel confining and claustrophobic as we were cut off from doing what we enjoyed. I spent my days laying on the couch, watching too much news, tracking daily COVID cases, and eating a lot of ice cream. The stress of the past year and the difficulty complying with a program that supports brain health also led to some progression of disease with some functional changes. My husband decided we needed to move, which I was initially resistant to do because I was deeply rooted in my community. However, it requires teamwork between patient and caregiver, and we must sacrifice for one another to do what is necessary to support one another as we live the best we can with dementia. So we got a puppy and moved to the beach. We have also been extremely fortunate that no one in our family has had a bad outcome from COVID thus far. Most of our friends and family have remained healthy, and we have had no funerals this past year. I've also been able to receive the vaccine along with several of my friends and family. Yet these positive experiences served as a revelation to me regarding where I fell on the spectrum of social inequality that was highlighted by the pandemic. As I reflect seriously on these problems, it confirms that I and all of us have responsibilities to address income inequality, racism, and health disparities. As I was preparing this talk, it also made me contemplate similarities between the COVID pandemic and my experiences living with dementia. I'll highlight 3 such areas for you to consider: healthcare deficiencies, financial challenges, and the experience of grief. The pandemic seems to have unmasked many deficiencies in our public health system, challenging the system's ability to respond to meet the demands of this healthcare crisis. Similarly, people living with dementia experience a healthcare system poorly equipped to meet their needs and the needs of their caregivers. When I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, it was a shocking diagnosis, and my husband and I were left with many unanswered questions. We were on our own to seek out information about stage, prognosis, symptoms of disease, and what to expect with disease progression, and to figure out resources to meet our needs. Just as reform is needed in our public health system, dementia care reform is also clearly needed. So I'm profoundly grateful for the research being done to overcome these deficiencies and for the opportunities I have been given to participate in the process. Another very challenging problem that resulted from the pandemic is the economic crisis, resulting in millions of people losing their job, experiencing food insecurity, and concerns about losing their home or being evicted. Similarly, A diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease can be financially devastating to patients and their families due to the crippling cost of healthcare and the impact of disease has on our ability to work. We need safety nets in place when tragedy strikes, but at a time when people are at their most vulnerable, they must confront an application process for disability and healthcare benefits that's designed to guard against fraud and made extremely difficult for applicants to navigate. In addition, the high financial costs associated with dementia care adds to an already challenging and stressful situation. The financial burden of this disease needs to be spotlighted so that it can be addressed to help patients and families living through this experience. In addition to the healthcare challenges and economic challenges, the pandemic has left hundreds of thousands of Americans grieving because someone they love died from COVID. All the strong feelings associated with loss and that challenge our coping skills has brought out intense and raw emotions in all of us during the pandemic. Living with Alzheimer's disease has taught me that death is not the only experience that leads us to grieve. In order to live well with dementia, we have to become experts in coping with loss and working through grief. With every loss, there's an adjustment that must follow in its wake. Understanding our feelings of loss in the context of grief can help us process our emotions, work through our difficult experiences, and restore our sense of well-being. Lastly, I'd like to share some lessons I've learned since I got sick that have now come into clearer focus during the pandemic. Living with Alzheimer's disease highlighted to me that how I choose to live my life in the midst of adversity directly impacts the lives of others, for the better or for the worse, especially those closest to me. So I made a choice to learn to adjust to my new circumstances and to keep a good attitude. In doing so, I've been able to teach my children through my example how to live well in good times and in bad. We have made considerable modifications in our life, simplifying as we go, but I have found greater happiness with fewer possessions and a quieter life. My husband and I have had to adjust to our changing roles and to one another living so closely together. This required communication, listening with an open mind, humility, forgiveness, and an understanding love. The experience of spending so much time together has helped us know ourselves and to know one another at a much deeper level. It has made us love one another more richly. Now we find greater pleasure spending so much time in one another's company. My life experiences have also led me to ponder about our shared human experience of suffering. Though we may not express our suffering to others, we deceive ourselves if we think we suffer alone. But these negative experiences are a part of everyone's life, and they seem to be necessary to help us grow and continue in our human development. It's hard when we fall on misfortune, but when we find ourselves in need of the support of others, it's then that we can appreciate how interdependent we truly are. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns, and we all find ourselves one day on top and the next on the bottom. It seems to me we need both those who are strong, willing to give generously of their time, skills, and resources, and we need those who are willing to accept charity with gratitude. Because both charity and gratitude are gifts we give one another that makes the world a better place. I'd like to close with an expression of gratitude for all of you. I was so moved by the way healthcare workers responded to this pandemic. At great personal cost, you overcame your fears and entered into the thick of the battle to save lives. Though we lost over 500,000 souls this past year, a number I can't wrap my brain around, the numbers could have been far worse if not for your tireless efforts. My roles serving both on the IMPACT Collaboratory and on the DCARE study helped me appreciate the difficulties pragmatic trial investigators have had to overcome due to the pandemic. It has been an incredibly challenging year, requiring many adaptations and procedural adjustments. I'm sincerely grateful for your efforts. Know that you are making a profound difference by your work. and that you are positively impacting the lives of countless people living with dementia and their caregivers.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Nicholson. I can't really think of more profound or appropriate words to underscore the mission of the Impact Collaboratory and the charge in front of us. So we are deeply grateful. Just a quick rundown on the next day and a half. In a few minutes, I'll give an overview of the collaboratory achievements and where we stand with our milestones. We'll then proceed this morning. I'll be hosting you this morning, and Vince will take over in the afternoon. We'll have some presentations at 11:30 from our pilot awardees, followed by a lunch break. At 1 o'clock, we'll resume with some highlights from really some key initiatives in the Impact Collaboratory. At 2, we'll hear some more details about our very interesting COVID supplements. And finally, for today, an update from our training core. Tomorrow morning, so I hope you'll be able to be part of as much as this morning as you can, and this afternoon. And tomorrow, we have 4 special sessions. I hope you're all signed up for one of them, one from our health equity team, another on a collaboration from our tech and data core with the ethics core. We have another special session of dyadic designs from the stats core. And then finally, the 4th breakout is by Spencer Hay, who will also present today regarding the initiative around creating iLibraries across the cores of the Impact Collaboratory. Great. Now I'll proceed with the general overview of our collaboratory milestones. Next slide. So just to recap the aims of the Impact Collaboratory, which you're becoming all familiar with, but basically our overriding goal is to serve as a national resource to promote the development and conduct of embedded pragmatic clinical trials to improve the care and health outcomes of persons living with dementia and their caregivers in partnership with the various healthcare systems. And we have 4 aims to achieve this goal: to establish our infrastructure, to develop and disseminate knowledge, enhance research development and investigator capacity, and to engage stakeholders. Next slide. So here on one slide, this beautiful graphic made by our communications team. Really, you can see on the across the top here, we have our 4 aims: design, support and design the conduct of EPCTs, develop and disseminate knowledge, build investigator capacity, catalyze stakeholders, and then a 5th column here to describe our COVID response. I will be going into, and several other speakers today will go over the details of these accomplishments, but just to highlight them here in this one graphic. And then on the bottom here, you could see a timeline dating remarkably only back to September 2019, when the Impact Collaboratory started. So in the design and support and conduct of EPCTs, we have had 5 cycles of national competitions, 4 for our pilot grants program and 1 more recently for our demonstration project program. Again, we'll hear more about these. We have developed a robust system for consulting and helping applicants, and we've conducted at least 42 pilot application consult meetings, representing about 176 expert hours. Under developing and disseminating knowledge, we have now an online publicly accessible knowledge repository where we house all our wonderful products, up to 131. We have up and working now a searchable database, the first of many, I hope, from the PCRO core that investigators can go to look at pragmatic outcomes that they can use in their EPCTs with dementia. We are participating last year and will this year in the AIC meeting, and we hosted by the Tech and Data Core, a large workshop around using algorithms for identifying dementia patients in secondary databases. We have had 3 cycles of national competitions to build investigator capacity, 2 for our CDA program and 1 for a health scholars program, which you'll hear more about. We have developed a wonderful learning library of videos, 20 now teaching modules, and very excited on the tomorrow afternoon and the following day, we'll host our first training workshop that includes 65 participants from 40 institutions. In terms of catalyzing stakeholder collaboration, highlights include the establishment of our Learning Health Network I'll describe. We've had 2 stakeholder advisory committee meetings each year, and you'll hear quite a bit today about our collaboration with the Alzheimer's Association in establishing a learning lived experience panel. COVID-19 response, again, you'll hear more about. We have a remarkable 7 supplements, 3 plus the RADx up for interventional research and 3 for data infrastructure. We've disseminated knowledge through 2 special grand rounds and podcasts and 5 peer-reviewed publications, and even got an article in the New York Times that highlighted the work of impact in the COVID pandemic, as well as a podcast on Jerry Powell. So let's launch into a few details about these accomplishments. Next slide, please. A little more mundane, but I won't go into this in too much detail because I'll describe some of them in the next few slides. But basically, AIM 1, our infrastructure highlights, and across the top, this is this calendar year, January to December 21. We by now have firmly established our infrastructure for our cores and teams and meetings and all that, including tomorrow will be the 3rd meeting of our external advisory panel, to which we are very grateful. A lot of infrastructure is dedicated to regulatory initiatives and requirements. Again, I'll describe a little bit more of that, as well as our expanded data infrastructure. Next slide. Also on infrastructure, we have a very busy communications team that work with the folks at Duke to maintain and update all the time our public website, our social media. We have a fantastic intranet for those within the collaboratory to access all kinds of documents and interact with each other. I mentioned the knowledge repository, as well as our quarterly newsletter. We have a very busy budget group headed up by Laura Bridge at Brown. We are now in the process of our 2nd year progress report. Thank you all for your contributions. And we are maintaining over 40 contracts and consulting agreements. And layered onto that, unanticipated when we started, was the budgets management for all the COVID supplements. We have a terrific project management shared by Brown and HSL, where we use the U grants at Brown for our grant submission system, and a fantastic platform called Smart Streets, to which we've developed quite a bit of expertise to manage a lot of aspects of our administrative structure. Next slide. So just a few highlights on infrastructure. These are some of our medium metrics. So for our website, we've had close to 90,000 page views. And you can see this broken down by some of the different pages. In a short time, we've had 27 peer-reviewed publications, the training modules, which I mentioned and we'll show you a bit later. We have a large distribution list, which we hope to continue to expand as our community expands. LinkedIn, Twitter, podcast for the grand rounds. And I mentioned the knowledge repository. We have 18 grand rounds to date, close to 2,000 attendees, averaging close to 107 attendees per grand rounds, and we're hoping to continue to improve that. And we've also hosted a number of webinars largely related to our RFAs for our grant mechanisms. Next slide. This is sort of a little bit of a mock-up of sort of a week in the life of the impact calendar. Now, don't think that Vince and I attend all these meetings. We don't, but just to illustrate activity going on simultaneously, and gray here, you show some of the leadership activities. We meet every Monday internally, Vince, myself, and the executive directors. Tuesday mornings, Vince and I meet with Dr. Bhattacharya. On the background, we've got communications and some of the administrative functions going with our communications team. Tuesday, every second week, our two admin cores at Brown and HSL meet. In the background, you see these core meetings that happen monthly for each core. Vince and I attend, one of us attend most of these. Thrown in there are grand rounds, a leadership meeting, and then some more administrative meetings. We have huddles at the two sites, etc. So you can see a lot going on to keep the everything running and all the functions going. Next slide. These are just some great examples of our Smartsheet platform. We use it to capture metrics, and this illustration is to capture metrics around our project consultation that we give, how many consults we give, which cores are involved, how many hours were involved. Here's an example of a web of this Smartsheet page or landing page for each core and team has one where they can organize their agendas and meetings and share documents amongst themselves. And we've even used Smartsheets as the application platform for our training workshop. So Erin Lewis and her team are just experts in Smartsheets. And it's been a great platform for our project administration. Next slide, please. Just a teeny bit about regulatory oversight for just to get a window in just one of the admin core's major functions. This is led by Julie Lima and her associate Tatiana Tuvin. But as all of you know, there's lots of regulatory challenges around EPCTs with lots of inconsistent interpretations, one of which is the issue of waiver consents, but there's many more. So we really have to have a regulatory oversight that's cognizant of these types of special considerations for EPCTs. We, as many of you know, have one single IRB for impact that we contract to Advera. Some of the pros are they have a very high level of personnel, many of which are actually quite familiar with the trappings of EPCTs, and they have many meetings a week, so they can usually review things pretty quickly. There are some cons. We actually found the review process a little slower than expected. I'll show you why. There's certainly costs involved. And then the added layer, we also have the local IRBs of the investigators that must see to Advera, which is a process in itself, and they can actually decline, although we haven't had that happen yet. Advera must also approve this site, and some of these processes take time. Next slide. So this is meant to look a little crazy, but what we expected in terms of oversight of our regulatory processes, in reality, you can see looks different. There's a lot more arrows in the lower illustration. We thought that, we, as Brown is the institutional site for prime site for impact, has to have their local IRB stuff, such as city requirements, etc., sent to Brown. Obviously, the PI sent to Advera. So does the PI of the project, as well as any co-PIs, co-investigators. So we had thought we would send all this stuff to Advera. They would look at it all together and approve the study. In fact, the process is broken down such that first Advera must approve the study protocol, and only then will they do these site approvals one by one. The PI sites, Brown, every single application has to approve Vince's city updates, so I hope he continues to do them on time, and also any co-investigators. So that's a lot, and by the time all this is done, we then have to funnel the projects for data safety monitoring, which is overseen by NIA. We actually have a dedicated impact DSMB, as well as an impact safety officer, and there's a decision made for each project whether the oversight required is a full DSMB, which is very unusual, solely a safety officer because it's minimal risk, or a combination of a DSMB and safety officer. So all this to say is there's a lot of regulatory oversight. All this takes time and is fairly complex. Next slide. So that's just a bit on infrastructure. Let's move on to developing and disseminating knowledge aims. The aim 2 of the collaboratory. I hope you've all been attending our monthly grand rounds and podcasts. We obviously disseminate our knowledge through peer-reviewed publications, the knowledge repository, which I'll show you in a minute, as well as the iLibraries, which I'll introduce to you, and then Spencer Hay will talk about in more detail this afternoon. We host special workshops such as the Tech Core's Data and Tech Core's workshop on algorithms, and we try to attend as many outside scientific meetings as possible, but obviously that has gotten curtailed with the pandemic. Next slide. These are just a screenshot of this year's grand rounds and podcasts. The first year we had each core do a presentation, and this year we asked each core or team to suggest an outside speaker. So we've had some great talks this year, and one coming up next week around health equity. Next slide. You're not meant to read the details of this, but just a screenshot of our knowledge repository. So our WordPress site, our main website, obviously can only hold so many PDFs and documents. And so with the help of DCRI, we've created a knowledge repository, which is open to the public, a searchable database with different filters where you can find the different materials and products produced from the IMPACT Collaboratory. And you could see they have different categorization here. And it's a very usable platform, which I anticipate will grow and grow as we do. Next slide. I won't go too far into the iLibraries because we're grateful for the leadership of Spencer Hay of the Ethics and Regulatory Core for leading this initiative. It's very cool, and there's a talk on it later this afternoon. But basically, we realized early on that a lot of most of the cores and teams, as one of their first exercises, were doing literature reviews and scans to collate and see what was out there with respect to EPCTs in their different areas. Some of this effort was overlapping, and so Spencer Hay is quite knowledgeable and in this area, and so we charged him with trying to collaborate with the cores and try to make a common platform for some of these efforts. And basically, the platform commonly uses Airtable, and we have one so far success story and hoping many more. We have launched the PCRO core has launched an iLibrary on our website where it's, for example, a database that you can search. Investigator can go look at if they want to do a study and they want to, let's say, have agitation as an outcome. They can look up on this library what are some pragmatic sources across different care settings for people living with dementia that can measure agitation. So that's just one example. And again, you'll hear more of this a little later. Next slide. All right, so moving on to aim 3, which is a big aim, research, development, and training. We have now, as I mentioned, 1, 2, 3, 4 cycles of pilots. Cycle 1 is in progress. You'll hear from those awardees. Cycle 2 is broken down to 2A and 2B with 9 funded projects. We are now just ushering in the applications for pilot cycle 3A. We offer consultations because we realized early on that the applicants were pretty naive in terms of EPCTs, as Dr. Cahotis alluded to. And so we have established quite a robust consultation service to help rise these applications to their full potential in terms of research design. And we also offer mentoring along the way for the funded projects through the pilot core. We've just launched our demonstration projects, which I'll talk about in the next couple slides, as well as the healthcare system scholar. You'll hear more from the training corps. We're now in our second cycle of CDA applicants and the training modules, which I'll introduce in the next couple slides, and the training workshop. And our next project we hope to start later this year will be developing some quick tips or quick guides for essential design elements of EPCTs in dementia generated from our cores. The research development certainly has been augmented with the COVID supplements, which you'll hear about more today. And we also do assist other NIA funded investigators who've gotten funded to do EPCTs through other grant mechanisms at NIA. And we've had some consultations with them to help them with certain aspects of the design of their projects. And we're certainly open to more of that. Next slide. So just a little highlights from this AIM. In terms of our pilot award applicants, we've had 25 applications so far. Here you can see how these applications distribute among different interventions, a lot of them around optimizing delivery and focused on patient-centered care. Some on medication safety and prescribing. I won't read all this, but as you can see, they span quite a number of different types of interventions. They also span a number of settings. I'm actually quite pleased that the main setting, the majority of these have been in primary care clinics, which is very rewarding to see, area of great need. ED departments, long-term care, as well as subacute nursing home care, etc. Next. Oh, and I should mention, we did a push when COVID came to prioritize interventions with telehealth, and about 44% of them did involve some sort of telemedicine type intervention. Next slide. You're going to hear from these grant awardees a little later on, so I won't belabor it, but just to show our cycle 1 and 2, 2A awardees in this slide. And you'll hear more from them later on, but congratulations to all of you. Next slide. So I mentioned this consultation service that we have created. Let me explain a little bit more about that. Again, the impetus was that we realized that the applicants needed help just because of the field is so new. And we wanted to make sure that these reach their full potential in terms of what we were looking for and what the field is looking for in terms of pragmatic design. And so what we did in the second cycle is we established a team of consultants, and each team has a lead. That's either myself, Vince, or Rosa Bear. Then we pulled quarantine experts from each core and team, as well as a regulatory representative, either Julie Lima or Tatiana Tubin. And what we do is we have a pre-consultation. So we have the LOI that's been accepted or for a full application. We review that LOI first in a pre-consultation amongst ourselves and highlight in a consultation document that you see here areas either of concern, questions, suggestions, etc. That prepares us for the first consult meeting with the investigator, where we review with her or him the study design and plans and try to insert our expertise to help improve it as best we can. We then give them several weeks to percolate and offer a second consultation to review where they ended up with our recommendations. Actually, in cycle 3A, we're now going to mandate a second consultation where we'll require them to have their actual specific aims page for us to look at. Some of them actually, after their general consultation, may require focus consultations with individual cores. For example, they may need extra help with outcomes or regulatory issues, and so they'll get a one-on-one with those a member of one of those cores. We estimated per application, there's probably about 16 hours of impact expertise devoted to them. Once a project is funded, as well as some of the NIA funded pragmatic trials from other mechanisms, we also provide consults to them too, which are triaged through our navigator team on the administrative core. We have also, in our new grant mechanism, the demonstration projects, have provided consultation to those as well. Next slide. We also recognized for various reasons that we need to diversify our portfolio, and this was also a recommendation from our external advisory panel. And so from the first cycle to the current time, we have done so in several ways. First, we recognize that some of the pilots were showing promise, but really needed to focus on a specific area before they were probably ready for one of our fuller pilots. So, for example, we're calling these mini pilots, and we just, there's no specific grant mechanism for this. These are pilots that our team and our project scientists recognize as having promise, but really need to focus. And so we offer up to $40K in direct costs for them to do that. So it might be about implementing something or modifying an intervention for a certain population. And so we've offered a couple of these so far, and you'll hear from them. More recently, we're very, very excited about a new mechanism called our demonstration projects, which was largely supported through unspent funds from our pilot projects, because in the first cycle, we just funded fewer than we anticipated. So these demonstration projects are much larger, up to $500K in direct costs spent over 2 months. These are national competitive awards, really targeting somewhat of a more senior investigator, hopefully partnered with a more junior investigator, but really intermeshed much more closely with an established healthcare system to a fully powered EPCT of an intervention for people living with dementia. We're sort of in the midst of our applications for our first demonstration project cycles. We have 4 very, very promising interventions, applications that we're very excited about. And finally, the third way we've augmented our portfolio is through a new program suggested to us by Marcel Salive, one of our project scientists, called the Healthcare System Scholars Program, which is being led by our Healthcare Systems Core. And this provides up to $120K to direct costs to an investigator. So someone like myself might have done a lot of research, but really doesn't really understand what it is to embed research into a healthcare system. So this is meant to take a clinical scientist in this field who needs to better understand a healthcare system and to provide support to embed themselves into that healthcare system, both to understand the needs for providing care for people living with dementia and their care partners in the healthcare system, and also how to actually get the project done from the C-suite to the frontline staff. We are also in the midst of that application process for that first RFA, and we have now I think 5 applicants coming forward to select hopefully 1 or 2 for this program. Next slide. So this table just shows you where we were in year 1 in terms of our grant mechanisms, with only 2 full grants, pilot grants funded, and 2 career development awards, quickly accelerating in year 2 to now 7 fully funded pilots with 2 minis, we're calling them. We hope to have another couple or up to 3 developed CDAs funded this year: the Healthcare System Scholar, the demo projects, and the COVID Supplement 7, as I mentioned, and hope to continue to grow some of these in the 3rd year. Next slide. Briefly, I'll mention some of the COVID supplements because you will be hearing about them in more detail later. We had really 4 that I'll sort of package under what I call supplements for interventions. These are pragmatic interventions and trials. Ellen McCready leading a project, a very interesting project with a group called Bluestone, which are a physicians group that provide care in assisted living settings, which is a great setting to actually get into for pragmatic trials. I've been very involved in this project, and it's been very rewarding to see this relationship develop with this healthcare system. And this particular intervention is around advanced care planning. Josh Chodos is leading one of the supplements around cohorting of safer cohorting of patients or residents and nursing home staff related to COVID status. Dr. Lou Lipsitz was received supplemental funding to analyze a very ambitious Massachusetts statewide project to manage COVID in the Massachusetts nursing homes. And we were fortunate to get one of the RADx UP components funded as a supplement. This is Impact C, which you'll hear more from by the PI in that, Sarah Berry, around mitigating vaccine hesitancy in nursing homes. Next slide. There are also several data structure infrastructures, data supplements for data infrastructure, which while were initiated under COVID, really we're hoping and anticipate we'll find a great platform for EPCTs in dementia more broadly once they're fully established. The first one is a partnership with Genesis, which owns and operates a large nursing home chain across the country. And this is a real-time monitoring system for adverse events from the COVID vaccine. And it's quite remarkable, but every night they upload data from their EMRs to the coordinating center of Brown, which is linked to MDS and Medicare data to generate a platform for all kinds of analyses and research, and hopefully for EPCTs. Another supplement is monitoring Medicare beneficiaries' response to COVID, and this is a partnership with actually CVS pharmacies and the Medicare Medicaid Resource Information Center to establish a data infrastructure to monitor effects of the COVID vaccination. And last, the Impact Nursing Home Data Sharing Cooperative, which is a large initiative that Vince is going to talk about later this afternoon, so I won't dwell on it right now. Next slide. Here are moving into training. We've got these two young investigators who are first CDA awardees. You'll hear from them a little bit later. Next slide. And one of our great activities this past year has been creating this learning library of impact training modules. This is a version of our landing site on our website, publicly accessible. And so what we've done here is each core team have generated these bite-sized modules, video modules, all standardized. They're about 15 minutes each, around different elements that people need to consider when designing EPTs and people living with dementia. And here you see them collated under each core and team. And if you would click on them, you'd see, for example, under data and statistics, you'd find 2 or 3 modules generated by that core. Next slide. All right, we're really excited about our training workshop, which will kick off tomorrow afternoon and lead into the next day. This kudos to Chris and Lexi who lead the training core. We have 65 trainees registered, and you can see that it's almost like a perfect pizza pie here. Their interest is widely, distributed among different areas, and their ranks largely associate or assistant professors, and some more junior investigators as well. We thank all the faculty for their contributions to the workshop coming up, and we hope that this will be a pipeline of not only trained investigators, but pilot applicants, CDA applicants, etc. Next slide. And our last aim, just to close this, is about engaging stakeholders. We've had 2 meetings now of our Stakeholder Advisory Council, usually held in December. We've established that Learning Health Network, which I'll comment on in a minute, as well as the Lived Experience Panel. We are trying for the first time to purposely embed stakeholders in our next cycle of pilot reviews. And I'll mention some other collaborations of other organizations or institutions doing similar work as ours as well. Next slide. So the Learning Health Network, led by our healthcare systems core, has established 4 communities representing different sites of care for people living with dementia, long-term care, broader healthcare settings, hospitals and EDs. and then community-based organizations. And what they've done is they've invited and recruited different large healthcare systems in each of these communities, and they hold meetings with them where they try to identify their specific challenges and needs for people living with dementia, and look for challenges and solutions, hopefully, to partner them with investigators to meet those challenges and generate pilot studies or other demonstration projects. Next slide. The Lived Experience panel, led by our stakeholder engagement team, together with our PCRO core, is a collaboration with the Alzheimer's Association. The intent here is to establish a panel of a member panel of people living with dementia and their care partners who can help the collaboratory integrate their perspectives into our work. And we established the infrastructure for this in the fall. And then in the winter, we held nominations to convene the panel. This was not without hiccups, and was very much a learning exercise, as our first attempt at this did not succeed in what we hoped to establish as a diverse panel. And so we took a step back and went back at it, had a second round of nominations, and we did a little bit better with nominations truly representing the diversity of people living with dementia. And we are happy that we will be able to now begin our quarterly meetings led by different cores to engage this panel. Next slide. And these are just some of the other collaborations for some other groups. I mentioned the Alzheimer's Association, but we also have collaboration with the Healthcare Systems Research Network in their initiatives around nursing home COVID research. The stakeholder engagement team and Gary Epstein-Lubau and Joe Gogler work with the Johnny Hartford Foundation. We are working with Eula Wang and her partners at the GEAR Network that are focused on doing research for patients living with dementia who pass through the emergency department, and have a close collaboration with the Roybal Centers, especially its leadership, in trying to establish a back and forth pipeline of investigators in their projects, in the sense that they will direct projects to them that we think are more upstream in the stage model in terms of the readiness of investigations for different stages, as well as them referring their investigators to us when they're ready to employ a more pragmatic design to their interventions. Next slide. So that is it for our overview. It's a lot in a short time. Again, thank you everyone for all your contributions, for making this so successful, especially during a challenging time, and we look forward to year 3. So I will close the overview section of the agenda, and let me just see where we are with time. We have 2 minutes before we move on to the next section. I think that what I will do is just move ahead with this to the pilot presentations, just in case we run out of extra time. So